All right. Good morning. All right, we're live. How is everyone going? Hey, Comics Legend, Winston, Agustin. How you guys doing? All right. Just finishing up the setup here. All right. Cool. So today we're gonna continue working on this guitar. It's taking longer than what I wanted, so we're gonna try to wrap it up today. We don't have many things or many other things to do in terms of new techniques, which is the entire purpose of these sessions. So I'm just gonna show you a couple of extra things for the tuning pegs. We did kind of like the strings last time. I'm just gonna show you what I did afterwards, which is nothing special. Other than that, I think we are pretty good to go. So we're gonna concentrate on just duplicating, generating the other strings basically, and yeah, and doing the tuning pegs and all of that, because hopefully that's gonna be enough to finish the guitar. Any other like fine-tuning things that could be done afterwards, but again, the whole idea of this asset was to show different ways to achieve maybe the same thing, and something that you can suit within your workflow. So let me show you what I've done. So the string. So last time, actually, let me just go a little bit closer. Right. So the string now is attached to the guitar, at least one part of it. Last time, what we did was these. Yeah. So last time, what we had was something like that, which was the C spheres, right? And we had it in preview, so that's what we get. Just a preview of the C spheres. I can't remember. I think last time we didn't do the knot, but it's essentially the same thing. It's just duplicating or creating new C spheres, holding shift so that it maintains a consistent thickness, and then wrap it around itself like that. And because it's a C sphere, when you click preview, it'll give you a preview of what those C spheres are going to generate in terms of topology. So that's pretty much all I did. I just converted this into a adaptive skin. I'm just walking through what I've done from last time. That wasn't kind of like done live. So I just clicked on create preview, create adaptive skin, sorry. I created the adaptive skin and I copy it here, and that's why I have a copy of it. And another thing I did, so this one, it's kind of hard to see. It's very, very thin. So this is the result of that unified skin. So what I've done after I did that is that I smooth the whole thing, right? So just a general smooth or a general polish of it. I think I also played with the inflate just to get the thickness right. So you see now this one is a lot smoother compared to this one. No, compared to, oh, don't know what it is now. Compared to this one, yeah. Now let's do it here so you can see. So this is the result of the C spheres straight away, right? So what I did to simplify or to smooth this out was to polish. So a polish of 2 or something, and that sort of smooths things quite a bit. Maybe do a bit of smoothing as well. And hang on, give me 1 second. Got an important call coming. Give me 1 second. Right, sorry about that. All good. So what I was saying is, after I did some polish, or after you do some polish or some smoothing, you can also use the inflate. All of these sliders, by the way, are the ones that you will find here in the formation as well. So you can use the inflate to reduce the thickness, right, or increase it if you want to make something more cartoonish or stylized or whatever. So what I've done is I increase the inflate just to give it some more thickness, but then I run the smoothing quite a bit. So let's do it from here. So I inflated, and then I just went ahead and did a few of these smoothing to get it really smooth and clean. And this is a a very clean topology. Let me just give it a single polygroup. Right, it's a very clean topology. The issue is that there's a lot of points here that we don't really need, because this is just a straight point or a straight string. So that was the next thing that I did. So I went ahead and basically deleted what was in between. Anything up to this point, I deleted that, and then I just moved those points. So you see, I took this point and I moved it all the way up, so there's no cuts or loops in that area. And that's just going to make it a lot easier to manipulate this string. So for example, if I go ahead and mask these points, grab the mask and bring in the gizmo to the unmasked areas, I don't know if you can see it. It's going to be, let's just get it closer. I can just take these points, and because there's no geometry in between, I can basically do this, right, and place it. So that's what I'm going to do. Once I duplicate it, I'm gonna tweak those, the position of those, because it's sort of like very slightly tapers towards the head span thing. Okay, so we're gonna do that. Hang on. Chris, I'm buying a desktop PC and I want to know what type of rigs desktop setup you suggest, like what CPU, GPU, etc. I'm probably not the best person to ask about that. I know that my rig is a pretty good one, and I'm happy to share the specs. In fact, if you go to the ZBrush Guides website, there is a guide specifically for that. So I just do a review of the Threadripper that I use, which now it's pretty old actually, but yeah, you have a list of all the specs, the exact specs that my computer has. It's just that, you know, nowadays with whatever is new, I'm not sure what, you know, what the compatibility would be and all that. Not necessarily the the best person to ask, but I'm happy to share what I have in my computer, which works very nicely most of the time. So yeah, if you go to the ZBrush Guides and just search for PC rig, or just go through the tutorials, there's a photo of the Threadripper, the CPU in there, so you can just have a look at that, and it comes with all the specs. How can I know my installed version of ZBrush? There's no about. You just look at the top left here. Can you see it? No, you cannot see it in my screen, but at the top left, it just says the version number. It should say ZBrush. In my case, it says 2021.1.1, and it should have your name or whatever name you use when you got the license. So, Peter, hey, how you doing, man? Thanks for tuning. All right, so let's go ahead and duplicate this, and then we can get into the pegs, because that's kind of like the other technique that I can show you. So I'm just gonna position the Gizmo 3D here, and let me bring in some, just a reference of kind of like the placement, because I think it's too close to the edge. So maybe something like that. And then I'm gonna hold Control, click and drag, and hopefully there's gonna be enough space. Let's see. And let go of the click. 3, 4, 5, and 6. Brilliant. Alright, so now we have all the strings. Obviously this looks very symmetrical, so later on we can use the move topological, right, and give it a bit of variation if you want, like that. We'll do that after. But this wasn't, you know, necessarily straight, so that's what I was saying before, that now that we don't have any loops here, it's going to be a lot easier to place them. But before I do that, what I'm going to do is maybe let's just go ahead and append a cube, and let's make it a Q cube or a quick cube. Put that over here. So I'm gonna do the kind of like the detail that connects these two pieces, this one and the neck of the guitar, and that is just like a way to help me. Well, it serves two purposes. It kind of like blends the two pieces nicely together, so it doesn't look weird. And the second thing is, if you divide it like in 6, or for like 6 sort of gaps, we can place those strings a little bit better. So it's gonna be something like that. Alright, so we just need to divide these a couple of times. So let's go into solid mode, right click, I'm going to click on insert, and I'm going to switch from single to multiple. So multiple allows me to obviously add multiple ones, but I can also, you know, place it right in the middle of 2 different loops. So if I just click once, it will just add 1 loop, but it will be right in the middle of these 2. But I actually need, let's see, 1, 2, 3. Let's go ahead and delete this one. Let's make it simple. Delete edge loop complete. Click on that. Go back to insert. So now we don't have any loops in between this, and I can just click and drag and generate those. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? Am I counting right? Yep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, cool. So that's pretty much it. The only thing is that the ones on the sides are closer to the edges, so I can just very easily mask this, invert, bring in the gizmo, and scale this like so. Maybe like that. Cool. So now we have those edge loops indicating where the strings would be, right? So you see, it's just gonna be easier to place them in those edges. All right, let's just leave this on for the time being. And the next step would be to create those gaps, right? Let me see some questions in the chat. Will you also show how to texture the wood too? Maybe how to do a circular design around the opening of the hole? Probably not texturing. I will definitely share some, depending on how much time we have, but because the idea is to complete this today or finish it today. But I'll show you some techniques of you know, texturing and poly painting. It's pretty simple, really, once you get the basics of it. For the circular design, you can do something. You can do it within ZBrush, or you can do it in Photoshop and then just project it, because it's a pretty flat surface, so it's gonna be pretty easy. Question about ZBrush core. Create a character. Certain parts are sharp and others are blurry. Example, nose is sharp, eyes are blurry. How to sharpen the blurry parts? Not entirely sure what you mean about that. Like, I don't know what you mean about sharp versus blurry in terms of ZBrush core meshes. If you can be more specific. In the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and right click, and I'm gonna bevel this about this much, just enough to create that gap. So something about that, about there. And then I can just click once on the rest of them, and ZBrush will obviously remember those settings. All right, then we can use the Alt key to just tag all of this. And we can go ahead and click and push this in. Actually, before I do that, let's insert an edge loop here, just to get it closer. Make sure that it's a single edge loop. So something like that. And this is just going to prevent the Q mesh to sort of push it all the way and connect the rest. So let's click and push that in. All right. So now we have those gaps, and we can enable dynamic and tweak those settings a little bit. So I like the smoothness of this, but obviously this needs to be sharper. So what I can do is take this one right in the middle, and I can bevel that. Let's get out of dynamic. So basically, this part that I just did there is just to sharpen the top and bottom edges. So I'm going to mask the middle, invert it, bring the gizmo, and scale this up like so, right? So something very close to the edges. Let's give it a single polygroup now and enable dynamic. Perfect. So we now have these sharp edges, and now we can do the same thing with this in the middle. So I'm going to right click, create insert, edge loop, multiple loops. And again, it's just to create one. I'm using the multiple edge loops to create a single loop, but that tool allows me to put it right in the middle, right? So I'm going to click once on all of this. Just the ones in the middle. I'll do this separately. Let's just do it now. And then I'm going to right click, bevel, and I'm going to click and drag, and then just duplicate the same effect. Okay, so that's going to give you a pretty decent and clean topology. And finally, if we want to sharpen this a little bit, I mean, I'm kind of happy with this semi, curvature, but I can right click, insert a single edge loop. Yeah, I don't want to destroy this one. You can sharpen it a little bit like this. But if we want to do it over all of them, again, go to solo, and we can use something that we used in the past, which is the slice curve, right? So we can click and drag, holding shift to snap to the a straight angle, and then use the spacebar to just reposition that curve. So that line is going to create a cut through the entire mesh like so, right? Let's give it a single polygroup again so you can see a bit better. And there we go. We can smooth it a bit more. Remember, we're using dynamic for most of those pieces. We're just using dynamic. All right, so that is looking good. Let's push this in just a bit. All right, so now it's just a matter of positioning those strings. And again, because the strings have no topology or any loops, sorry, it doesn't have topology, it doesn't have any loop in between these points here at the top and kind of like where the string is wrapping around at the bottom on the bridge, then we can position these very easily. So what I'll do is, let's move to the move brush just in case, and I'm gonna hold control and mask just these points, invert the mask, bring in the gizmo, and center to the unmasked areas. All right, so now I can just take these axes and position it right there and follow the same idea, right? So hold control, mask that point, invert the mask, bring in the gizmo. You don't have to center it, you can just actually just do that, right? Same idea. Invert the mask, You can also, if you want to save a step, I mean, I'm used to do it like this, but once you have your mask, instead of masking and then inverting, you can just hold the Alt key, right? And that would unmask just that area. So that's gonna be faster. It's just it saves a step. But I don't know, I'm just very used to the process of masking, clicking on the canvas and bring that mask. I mean, it just saves one step and it's pretty cool. It's just, I don't know, I'm I'm used to do it this way. Perfect. So now we fit those in place. I'm gonna invert that, and I'm gonna scale it in the y-axis just to flatten those and bring them closer. And obviously this needs to be connected, but it's gonna be a lot easier to just kind of like extrude from these points, right? From here to whatever they go, right? So we'll do that in a second, but so far so good. And you see nothing got destroyed here at the bottom. So yeah, that's looking good. And again, if you want to vary the thickness obviously of each one of the strings, you can do that with the technique that I showed you at the beginning, like with the inflate and the smooth and all of that. So I might do that later on, but for now, I mean, that's a pretty simple thing to do. So let's go ahead and do a quick save. All right. I don't know if there is any questions coming from Facebook or Twitch. It's just displaying the ones from YouTube. So if there's anyone like watching this on Facebook or Twitch, let me know. Like, well, I guess you cannot let me know if I cannot see the questions, right? Hey Jevin, how you doing? All right. So let's go ahead and do the tuning pegs. So I've done something. Do I have it here? Yep. So I started working on those things just to show you roughly what we're gonna create. So this is the type of thing that this is the mechanism, right? To tuning the strings, or to tune in the guitar. But I'm gonna show you how to. I'm gonna use this one because I already have it just to save time. But I'll show you how to do it. It's incredibly fast to generate this type of thing. Oh, thanks, Asema. Asemia. Sorry. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I just wanted to see that the comments were, or the questions were coming through properly. All right. So the way that I created these things were just using the initialize settings, really. And like that's what I'm saying. It's really easy to do. So I have this one. I have this tube, which is just part of this little metal little bar, and here at the bottom we're gonna have the actual tuning peg thingy. So the more rounded thing, which we can actually do right now. But before I do that, I'm gonna show you how to build those things, those assets. So let's start. I mean, the tube is pretty straightforward. It's just a tube that I extrude some edges, right? Nothing fancy really. But this sort of like twirly thing, let's do that one first. You can start with a Helix 3D, right? It remembers my settings, but let's see if we can reset it to where it was. You know what? I'm gonna do something. Just because I want to show you the whole process, not just always. It's just kind of like those cooking shows where I just show you the result. What am I looking? Copy. Oh, okay. This is another thing I should mention. If you want to copy an entire folder, you can actually do it. It's just I forgot, but it's not in the cog icon here. You have to go to, I think it's macros. Let me see. Macros. It might be macro, or it might be. I forgot what it is. Might be in the subtool master. Let me check. Yep. Okay. So if you go to the C plugins and open up the subtool master, once you have your entire folder selected, you can just click on copy folder, and it will copy all of the subtools obviously in that folder. Then let's go into this working file, and let's go ahead and go to the C plugin again and paste folder. Right, so I just pasted those. And tuning peak, this one, right? So I have all those pieces inside the working file. So we're gonna keep working on those and then just obviously place it and scale it down. But that's how you copy folders between tools, just using this subtool master. I'm gonna go ahead and put all of these within the same folder as well. Let's call it neck, just for reference there. All right, so that way we can hide more things at once. All right, so the whole thing, or the whole idea, or the reason why I did that, and was so I can save. I'll just push this. Let's call it 4. All right, so the reason I did that was so that I can save the tool, and then I can initialize ZBrush, so that all the settings for those initialized settings are the same. So let me just bring back the guitar and the tuning thing. Okay. All right. So now we should have the settings back to 0 or the default. That's just gonna be the easiest way to show you. All right. So we're gonna do this bit. That's pretty simple. So I did that using the Helix, right? So this is the default setting or what you can see. So Helix 3D, right? And obviously this is a primitive 3D. So we can edit this based on math or in like just moving some sliders and stuff like that. But we cannot sculpt on it. And that's actually a great thing, that we don't have to sculpt anything to be able to change it. So before, I mean, you can you can complete the initialize settings and change the original shape a little bit and then convert it to a mesh that you can actually edit. So at this point, it is a primitive 3D, and then you can tell that it's a primitive 3D because there are a few functions that are not available. So you see in my UI here at the bottom, I don't have a lot of the things that I usually have, just because. So if I switch to this one, here are all my settings, and that's just because this is a primitive 3D. So if you go down to the initialize palette, here's how you can change the profile of all of this. So what I did was I went to the radius. Actually, let's change the offset first. So if you go to the offset, the way that these profiles and these curves work in ZBrush is actually pretty simple. Anything on the left hand side just means the root or the beginning of whatever you're using, and the right hand side means the end or the tip. So if I push this dot up, let's actually reset that, and let's play with the offset. But I want to make sure that the offset is actually, the offset should be like that, because it's coming from the center in a way, and the radius is the one that we can change, as well as the thickness. Thickness is fine. Radius. So I'm gonna reset the radius, and you see, where's my Epic pen? This is kind of like the radius thing. Okay, so this curve here, you're basically editing this in a way. So if you make something like this with points, you will change the shape of that thing. So let's see if that's true. I want to reset this, and I'm going to try to do this just with points, roughly. So you see, it's just a matter of changing this, and you can completely change the shape of that original piece. So for what I did for the actual peg was to reset this and push that all the way up. So now I had, you know, a very consistent, kind of like a spring, right? But I didn't need as many of these loops, so you can change that with the coverage. So from 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 loops, right? You can change that to, I think I put 3. Yeah, so 3, something like that. And then we can go ahead and change or play around with the offset, right? So the idea here with the offset is just to try to find the, you know, the gap where the tuning peg or the cog thing will fit in on the rest of the mechanism. But let's say that that's something that you like. Actually, let's keep it as it was, and I just show you another way. So with this one, you can determine kind of like the radius of this in a way, but then you can use the thickness, which is pretty flat, to determine the thickness of this whole thing. So basically, right now this is going to be consistent all across, right? So this is the thickness. But then if you go ahead and do something like this with this curve, what you're going to end up with is a very sharp point here, which is what I did, right? So if you had like a single tube and not a spiral, it would look like this in a way. So what I did for this was click and drag. By the way, if you want to have a sharper point, you can just click, drag it out of the profile curve and bring it back without letting go of the click, and you'll see it's kind of like a sharp point. So I use that to set it up like that. Take this one down. This one as well. So now these 2 points, the beginning and the end, they're pretty sharp, right? Because they're right at the bottom, maybe not that much. And then we can play with these points to fine tune the thickness of the rest, right? And of course, if you want, you can just come back to the offset and play around with that, right? Let's see. No worries, man. Glad you like it. I'm gonna change my UI resolution. We're gonna 4K monitor, and everything looks blurry and huge icons. Yeah, there's a way to do it. I can't remember exactly what. I think it's by default, but so it must be something in the preference. I just can't remember where it is. I also have a tablet, or like the Cintiq is 4K, but I just changed the resolution because it just gives me issues with, you know, not every single app is 4K, and I don't really need it, so I just change it to the default, you know, 1920 by 1080, and that works fine. So sorry, I don't know exactly where that is, but it can be done. Anyway, so once I have this ready, you know, if you want to make this a little bit less smooth, the change between the thickness of this and the endpoint, what you can do is just push these points closer. So you see, just by putting them closer to the edges, it just sharpen that transition, which is kind of cool. And then you can go ahead and click on Make Polymesh 3D, and that's basically converting that piece into an editable mesh. So now you can use all your sculpting brushes. We can move these and all of that. Okay, that's basically it. We can go ahead and append. Oh, not paste, append a cylinder. just so that you can see what I did for the other piece, and set it up like so. I think this should be a little bit smaller like that, right? And the rest is just pretty simple. We can hide this piece, give it a polygroup, hide the top bar as well, give it a polygroup, right? So just polygrouping those things. Same thing here. And then we can bring in the C modeler, right click on a face, Q mesh, polygroup all, so that it affects everything with the same polygroup. Then just extrude that like so. Same thing here, and then you can hold the Alt key to change the polygroup. All right, something like that, and then you can hold the Control to reposition that. That sort of thing. Obviously, if you have reference, just try to follow. That's what I was trying to do. Anyway, so that's the thing, and here at the bottom is where you have the actual thingy. Right, something like that. All right, and the gear thing, that's kind of like the one that looks more complicated, but it's again super simple. So for the gear, you can use the gear 3D, obviously. So you click on that one, and that one has a lot of modifiers, but again, it's just a matter of playing around with all of these values, and you don't have to know a lot of all you need to know is what you're aiming to do, and then just try to replicate it, just playing with these sliders really. So coverage obviously is 360, is complete, it's a complete loop, but you can change that to be only half if you want, but we want 360. So the radius is the inner radius, sorry. So I'm gonna change this to like 70, and I have some of the values that I used in the previous one, like I wrote them down, so I know sort of what to aim for. The width is just essentially the width of that gear, so I'm gonna go for 80, right? The outer skew, or the outer size, I'm gonna set this to 40, and the outer repeat count, that's basically those spikes of the gear. So we can increase that quite a bit. I'm gonna go for 16. The reason I go for 16 or 32 or 8, right, is just so that I can use the exponential, increasing exponentially those numbers in other settings. So for example, the subdivision count, I would leave it at 128, and it sort of like matches. So let me just explain that. So if I go 16 here, right, it's gonna be basically a loop. This one is how many kind of like those loops we're adding. So if I set it to 16, those lines will match exactly the amount of the inner radius. Sorry, the amount of the outer repeat count. So if I set this to 32, right, you won't see any change because this value is larger than the amount of geometry that we're setting. So in other words, with this outer count, we're telling ZBrush that we want to have 32 of these spikes in a way. So instead of having 1, 2, 3, blah, 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 16 of those, we are telling ZBrush that we want 32. So that means, yeah, 1, 2, 3, blah, blah, blah. So it's basically having an in-between those in there, right? But because we're limiting the amount of subdivisions with 16, right? We're limiting this to these loops. This is what this controls. Basically, you won't be able to see what we're describing here. So we need to increase this number to at least 32, so that ZBrush knows, okay, instead of 16, we're gonna have another subdivision right in the middle of those that we already have, and therefore we will be able to describe those 32 points. So let me see if that makes sense, or if I can make sense of it. So 32 here. So you see it's more rounded and perfect because this is too much. So what I do is set this to 16, right? And I know that because of the profiles and the other settings that I have enough resolution to describe those. So let's set it to 128. So you can go 16 or 32 or 64, right, or 128. So now I have 128 loops around here. Okay. The outer profile, that's gonna be the one that is gonna give us the basically this outer profile like that. That is essentially this thing, or the profile of this this part. So what I want to have for this is something more like this, right? So when we tweak this profile, it's gonna be kind of like this in a way. So that's gonna give us the mechanism of the gear, right? So let's just do that. Push that all the way up, and now we sort of got rid of that. I'm gonna click, push it out, bring it back in to around there. Right. So this is pretty cool because you don't have to model anything. We're just playing with math, but you don't really have to do the math in a way. So it's just tweaking those sliders. So if you want something very, very sharp, right? So right now what we're describing with this shape is essentially this, right? But if you want something a little bit softer, like that, all you have to do is soften those points, or the transition of those points, right? So if instead of having this very sharp one, I can just have something like this, and you see that curvature is a lot softer. So we can go for something like that just for sake of illustration here, right? And that's really what that profile is. And then you have the outer section, which is basically this very sharp line. Right? And because the points sort of like finish here, but you still have this gap, right? That's this gap in here. So ZBrush is gonna fill in that area with whatever other settings you put, right? So all we have to do is just let's reset this, and now we have that curvature like this, and we can just push that up like that, and now we have a very sharp cog icon. Let me just get rid of these things in between because I don't like it. So all we have to do is reset this section in the middle. We don't even have to reset it. We can just take this to 0, the inner height, and that's it. So the repeat count is the same thing as the outer one. Yep, so that's pretty much it. But we can go back to the outer section, which is now full, it's like square, and then we can give it a bit of tapering. So we can click point in there, and then bring this one down as well, right? So that gives us a bit of tapering. Doesn't look great, so let's just sharpen those points a bit more. I'm only concerned about one side because I'm gonna mirror and weld it anyway. And the amount of loops that we have in here, we can control that from this subdivision count. So this subdivision count L or S, well, these ones refer to the ones that we have here, like that you can see going through the cog or the cog thing, the gear, and the one that we set at 128 are basically these ones. It's kind of like horizontal and vertical. So we can reduce these to, something smaller. It doesn't have to be. Let's go for 16. Yeah, I think that's plenty. All right, and then that's it. We can go ahead and click on Polymesh 3D. We're gonna bring in the gizmo, and I'm gonna rotate it 90 degrees. And we can go ahead and do mirror and well, so that now we have a perfectly mirrored gear. And I'm gonna click on slide, enable symmetry, and I'm gonna slide the complete edge loop. Just to make this a bit more consistent. And maybe add a couple of insert loops here. So insert, hang on, right click on an edge, insert single edge loop, click and drag, and maybe one here in the middle. So that should be enough to enable dynamic and have a very nice and clean piece that we can use for our guitar. Finally, let's go back to it then. So here, this tuning peg, you'll see it's pretty much the same thing, right? In fact, I think I like the new one more, but I think it's just a matter of sharpening these things. So I'm just gonna sharpen that and bring in the slide again. There we go, not too bad. I'm gonna add, I'm gonna add one towards this edge to make it very sharp. Yep, better. Alrighty, so now we have that. Let's do a quick save. We can do the actual tuning peg. All right, so what I'll do is hide everything but this bit, right? So we have a reference, and I'm gonna append a cube and cube it. So this is gonna be that thing. Right? I think we can use, what can we use for this? We can use some deformers, I guess, that we haven't used. Let's go for something like that. Let's bring in the C model, and I want to delete these points. So delete, not this point, the loops. Right, so we have the simplest form of that cube. And I'm going to right click, I'm going to click on insert multi-edge loops, click and drag, and I'm just going to add a few more points. I mean, we can keep this very low res, and you can do that if you want. I just want to have more points so we can deform it a bit better. Yeah, so that's it. We're just gonna go ahead and click on dynamic, done. That's it. No, of course not. Although it doesn't look bad, but that's not the shape that I'm going for. We're gonna do something a bit more complex. So bring in the gizmo, click on the cog icon. We can use the taper deformer. Yeah, I think the taper would be fine. Let's see. Yeah, let's go ahead and click on this one on the right hand side, and I'm gonna hold shift just to get those integer numbers, maybe 0.3, and the same thing on this side, hold shift 0.3, and that alone just gives us something pretty decent. I'm gonna do the same thing with this one, so just a little bit more. 0.05 is fine. 0.05 in from this side as well, just a tiny bit. And let's try the top as well. Again, maybe 0.1. All right, so you see, just with the deformer we get that shape, and then we can play around with the exponent. So the exponent is going to change the influence of that curve, so it's going to make it even very, very sharp, or inverted if anything. So we can just tweak that a tiny bit more like that. Right, and I feel like we can push this even further, so -1, -1, because then we can just add another loop here and sharpen that in a way. So I think that's fine. We'll tweak this. We'll tweak this one later with a lattice as well, and just fine tune the shape. But I think that's fine. You can also use these cones here to change the opacity, or kind of like blend the influence of those cones. So in the y-axis you can just do this and basically change the influence of the opacity, which is pretty cool, right? So maybe something like that, and we don't have to use the extra edge loops. Something like that I think is looking good. So let's click on the cog icon, accept that, and we did that using dynamic. So this is the result of the tapering effect without dynamic, which I think is looking pretty good. Before I do the lattice, what I want to do is maybe insert a couple of edge loops. So single edge loop right to the edge almost, and that will sharpen that whole thing. Right, so I think that looks okay. All right, so let's go ahead and bring in the gizmo cog icon, or the gear icon, and I lost it. Where is it? Oh, okay, I was looking for the lattice. It's kind of like a lattice, but it's not in this case. ZBrush is not called a lattice. It's actually a soft deformer. So you can use a hard deformer, a soft deformer, or just a deformer. I think for this shape, because we want something pretty smooth, I'm going to use the soft deformer. There we go. So this is kind of like a lattice. That's what I meant, but it's not called lattice, it's called soft deformer. All right, so this one is super cool because you have the yellow cones. They are the controllers of how many loops or how many subdivisions you're adding to that lattice. And a lattice is nothing more than kind of like a mesh that wraps, like a cube mesh, or another, well, it's just a lattice. it's just imagine like a virtual cube, just a mesh that goes on top of your object, and then you have points that have influence for the rest of the mesh. So this is imagine like putting a cube on top of this that has a lot less points, so you can manipulate the whole thing a lot easier. So if I move this point right here, it's gonna affect, I know for you guys this might be something pretty basic, but if I move this point, because there are less points, it's just gonna be affecting this area in a way. Hopefully that's gonna make sense, but I can do this, right? And that's exactly what I need. But these points here, they're gonna change the amount of subdivisions. So I can push this like so, and this is what I want to get, like a few more points in here so that I can just squish the sides like so, and then another one here. I think that's plenty. Right, and then what we can do is hold Control and clear the mask, and you can do the same thing here. Hold Control, unmask these points, hold Control, unmask these points. So all the white dots are gonna be the ones that we are affecting. So we can use the gizmo to do this. We can extend it if we want, but I think it's looking good. Push this down a bit, right? And if we want to make it a bit sort of more rounded, we can unmask these ones and just do something like this, right? I think my guitar is actually like this, to be honest, so we can also do that. It's more like that than anything. And a good thing about this deformer is that you can sorry you can also change the, like, you can add symmetry if you want with the green, blue, and red, but I think this one works. Gear icon, accept, right? And now we can just tweak the overall shape. I mean, it's too big. All right, so that's it. Now we can go ahead and combine these things. Let's just place them properly. Actually, this is way too short. It should be almost like here, right? You can take this cylinder, want to right click on a face, make sure it's Q mesh, polygroup all, click and drag, push this down, and click insert new edge loop there, just to sharpen that bit. Right, so I think that makes a lot more sense. We can go ahead and add a couple of interesting details here just by adding some extra loops, and then right click, bevel, so I'm gonna go ahead and hang on. It's gonna be easy if I just bring in the symmetry and the radial symmetry. And this should have 32 by default, if I'm not mistaken, on the y-axis. Yep. So I can just use the radial symmetry because this tube is right in the middle of the wall, and hold the Alt key to tag all of these points. Right, and then I can right click, Q mesh, polygroup all, and extrude that. And that's just gonna make a nice sort of detail in there. Whoops, that was not meant to be there. And that happened just because I had the same polygroup at the bottom and at the top, and I used the polygroup all. But that's, yeah, that's cool. Alrighty, so I can enable dynamic for this one as well, and we can go ahead and tweak some of the settings for this. I think I kind of like it, but I'm gonna right click, insert single edge loop. I'm gonna sharpen this one and this one. And again, the sharpening just happens by adding loops. And the reason, I mean, you can do all of these within the dynamic settings. The reason I'm just adding loops is simply because when I combine these objects, if I want to combine them together, then the settings on the dynamics are going to be the same for all of them, and it's not going to override anything. So I can just define the sharpness of these with just extra loops. But it's, you know, it's this is the type of things that is completely up to you. You want to try to keep it like super low res for some reason. You can do all with dynamic, or everything with dynamic, and it should be fine. Right. So I think that's cool. Dynamic. Also, I'm gonna add another subdivision for this, and dynamic for this one as well, and dynamic for this one as well. Right, so let's place this properly, and I think we might have to, just to make it fit a bit better, might have to squish this down a bit. So this is just a quick fine-tuning. Mask this one. Actually, I'm gonna, before I do any of that, I'm gonna get rid of some edge loops here. Just so that I can bring this down easily. Alrighty. So the only thing that we're missing is kind of like the actual thing that goes through the head of the guitar. So let's do a quick save, and that's just gonna be a tube that we can tweak. So let's append a tube or a cylinder. Let's rotate it 90 degrees, holding shift, scale that down, scale that in the y-axis, and I think it's gonna be roughly the same size as the, or maybe a bit bigger than the little gear. And I'm gonna set it up like this. We're gonna change the size and the placement of this in just a second, but all I need is to create an insert pointing here, and then just tag all of these. This is my favorite thing, by the way. One of my favorite things of the new C modeler, that I can just untag things that I accidentally tagged. Alright, so right click, QMesh, polygroup all, extrude that like so, and now we can have a kind of like a reference for where to place those things. So it's gonna be something like that. And I'll see the chat, just give me 1 second, I'll get to it in just a second. So I'm just gonna try to place this right in the middle there. Again, you can be more precise than me, but this is just fine. Alright, so that's what goes through it in a way, like that. Right, and then we can just add a bolt in here. So let's see, let's go to the IM modeling kit, IMM, and let's just use this one. Click and drag, and I'm gonna split on mask so that we can keep this in a separate subtool or on its own. There we go. Dynamic. We can also make this one dynamic. We just need to add a few edge loops, but I will add that after, once we actually let's just add a couple. So we can add one here just to sharpen this, and another one there, and we can do the same thing here. So you see, this is more of the same, really. Not doing anything complicated, but now we have this thing that is working fine, and we just need to create that sort of area that holds those pegs. But we can basically tweak this. So sorry about the noise, guys. I mean, someone is just drilling. I don't know if you can hear that. Which is it's a great noise. It's one of my favorite background, noises and white noise to sleep. Actually, the drilling sound. It's bloody annoying. Very low in the background. All right, that's cool then. All right, let me see what other things we have here in the chat, and then we'll get back to it. So I'll switch to cool. So how can I change that? Bounding box. Yep. What you're making? So we're still working on the guitar. Have you got the new clothing brush already? So the clothing brushes and the clothing dynamics in ZBrush, that's part of the introduction series that I did, which is just a series of videos. So you can just go to the ZBrush guides and watch it there. It's actually, let me show you. So if I go to the ZBrush guides, oh, by the way, so someone else mentioned the brushes. So the brushes is just an update that I did for the scheme brushes pack. So this one right here, right? So this is the one that it has been for a while in the ZBrush guides, but I did a free update with some new brushes. So these ones here, well, these brushes. So it's just a free update. If you already had it, you should have got an email about it. I also put it in ZBrush Central if you want to check it out there. But it's basically a set of 29 new brushes for slightly different workflow, and I have a kind of like a tutorial showing them and show how they work and how to use them. So you can just go ahead and if you don't have it, you can just get it, and then you will have all the previous 43 brushes plus the new ones, the 26 new brushes that I added. And this is just an example of the more kind of like, this is still a little bit stylized, and that's just I tend to always move towards the more stylized character, but it's suitable for a more realistic approach and more realistic type of character. So I'll put a link in the chat in case you're interested. There we go. But if you go to the ZBrush guides, let me just go to a thing here. So ZBrush guides. Might be a little bit slow. All right. By the way, I'm in the process of like sourcing out a new way to host the website, because I know it is extremely slow. So if you go to the ZBrush guides website, let's go to tutorial. So This is the tutorial about the skin brushes update. So I go through all of the new brushes and how to use them and how I use them. This is the intro to the ZBrush 2021, and I covered, you know, how to do the clothing for this character and all the tricks for like the creature, just general tips and tricks and how I was using those features when I was testing the ZBrush guide, the ZBrush 2021 update. So I'll leave it there, guys, if you want to use it. But going back to this thing, we can go ahead and enable this one. That's huge. So I think what I'm going to do is just merge all of these things together, but keep the originals, obviously. So we can do that because I have the folder. So click on the gear icon, and I'm gonna merge folder, and that basically, let's put that one here at the top. Right? That basically keeps all the originals, but it combines everything into a single one, right? And we can just enable dynamic, and this is the reason I basically sharpened the edges and all of that using just extra loops, so that when I combine everything, we can use a single set of dynamic settings, right? So I can set 3 levels of subdivision in the dynamic for all of them, and that should work just fine. All right, but now we can scale this down and start working on positioning this. 90 degrees. Of course, we're just going to work on one side and then mirror it to the other. Something like that. All right, so I think let's see. Let's put this one there. Then hold Control, click and drag roughly. Actually, before I duplicate anything, let's just work on this object. So I'm gonna hold Control, invert that, push that like so, just to put it put all the way in. And then let's go ahead and add an edge loop. There we go. So it looks a lot sharper. And again, what we can do as well is to remove actually some of these edge loops. So right click, delete edge loop complete. So I'm gonna delete all of this. And the only reason I'm doing that is so that I can move these points a bit easier, right? Because I want to put this closer to this area. So I'm gonna hold Control and take all of these, invert the mask, and push that in like that, almost, right? And that's really all there is to it. The dynamic on, maybe add an edge loop here. Whoops. Right click, insert an edge loop. I'm just gonna insert a couple more just so that we can sharpen all of that. Oops. Alrighty. So that should do the trick. And I have transparency enabled. So now I'm more confident that this would work. So I'm gonna hold Control, just put it roughly to the middle, and then let go of the click without, let go of Control without letting go of the click. And that's just duplicating it right in the same spot. Clear the mask. and I think these ones are too close to each other. But I think it might be because this is like huge. So let's undo that. And this is just fine-tuning this to make it look better. I'm gonna go ahead and auto group everything. So everything has, there's no continuity of the topology in certain elements. So I can very easily go ahead and hide this. Control, invert the mask. I'm just gonna make it a bit smaller. And I'm only scaling it in the Y and in the Z axis in this case, just so that the thickness is maintained, so that we can actually place it on this tube. So I think something like that. I mean, it should actually be a little bit more like that. All right, clear that mask. By the way, you don't have to actually duplicate it. You can do this kind of like, you can actually use the array mesh. Yeah, let's actually use array mesh, because that might be something else that you can use for this. Let's do a quick save. And with the array mesh, what you can do is just duplicate that or have instances of that. So if you have to do any tweaks like I just did there, you can basically do them and it will be applied to the rest. So you do it in one, and then ZBrush will apply it to the instances. So the array mesh, let's click on array mesh. I'm going to repeat it 3 times just so that it goes up. So in the offset, scale offset in the Y axis, right? So Y, I'm going to push this up. So let's go for -3, no, -4. That's kind of like the distance, really. So that makes me feel like that this is the one that is not great. So let's go ahead and tweak this. Something like that. Yeah, I think that feels a bit better. I think. All right. So going back to this one, we can go ahead and move it like that. So these ones are just instances of what we had, and then let's say now that we have the head of the guitar a little bit taller, we can go back to hold Control and Shift to isolate, mask, invert the selection, invert the mask, bring in the gizmo, and then we can tweak these type of things, and then you'll see it's applied to the rest, because it's just an instance. Yeah, something like that. I think it's fine. It's looking good. And now, because we actually changed the volume, and basically the way that array works, or the array mesh works, is based on the entire volume of your mesh. So in a way, the array mesh is just looking at the bounding box, the bounding volume of that. And that's what is kind of like offsetting. So if you take this one and make it longer like this, you're actually changing the volume of the entire array. So everything is going to be moved a lot more. So because of that, we're going to have to just tweak this and make it -3.5, -3. Oops, and -3.7. There we go. That's good. Okay, so that's looking good. Let's go ahead and do the other side, and that's just gonna be easy again using the array mesh. So what I'll do is append a new one. So you can do multiple arrays, obviously. So the first one is just giving me this. This second array is gonna give me the other side. So let's mirror on the X, and offset it in the X as well by 2 or 3 or 4, 3 or 2.5. Alright, so we need to be more diligent about this placement. I think it's 2.6 is fine. There we go. Right, and of course you can use the move brush to move them all at once to just fine tune them. At the end, I'm gonna apply this array mesh because I'm gonna obviously change the rotation of all of this to make it more realistic, like it's actually a tuned guitar in a way. But that's, yeah, that's really all there is to it. Cool. What else we're gonna do? All right. So now that we have these, we can actually do kind of like this string wrapping around. So I'm gonna show you how to do that. We have plenty of time. Let's do a quick save now that this is looking good. Alrighty. So to do the string, we can start with a helix or something similar, and then just tweak it a little bit. So for example, let's select helix 3D, right? And these will determine. Let's change the radius back to this. So you see, it's kind of like wrapping around that string. So what we can do is just determine how many wraps we're gonna have, and obviously depending on how many times you rotate that your tuning peg, you have more. But I'm gonna go for, let's go 6, or maybe even less than that, 5. Yeah, I think that's plenty, even less. Let's go for 4. 4 seems to be a good one. And then we can change the thickness. Actually, let's reset the thickness so we can see roughly what we're gonna get if we do something like that. Yeah, I think this is fine. We can fine tune all of that, the placement and all of that later. Now, before I actually convert this into the usable mesh, I want to double check something, and I'll tell you what that is. The strings, right? They have a specific amount of loops, right? And what I want to do is use the tools that we, or the helix 3D to match what we did already, and then we can go ahead and tweak those. So let's let me try to explain what I'm trying to do. So these strings, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 points. So I want to match the same points in what we're doing here with the helix, right? And right now we have 16 by default. Yeah. So I'm gonna change this to 8. And now this should match those strings that we have. The rest doesn't matter. Let's go ahead and click polymesh, copy, and yeah, I'm gonna put it within the strings, paste. It's gonna be very small now. I'm gonna get it closer to the string so that I can roughly match the thickness. Right. And then we can simply rotate this thing around, actually like this, and maybe rotate it like that as well. So 90 degrees in both of those axes, and then we can place it. Now, the thickness doesn't really match what we did, roughly. So we need to scale everything and then play with the inflate. So I'm going to scale it like so. maybe less, right? Let's hide this bit. All right, that's looking good. Now I guess we can scale it a tiny bit and from the center. All right, just a little bit. And then just to make sure that this is the same thickness, we can roughly go ahead and this is it's not a trick, it's just something that I would use in this scenario where I already place something like this. I can just duplicate this and put it closer, do basically what I did before, just sort of like place it in there. It's pretty close. I mean, it's not, it's just, this is just me being pedantic about these type of things. Details, I'm gonna clear the mask, so now I have these two elements that live within the same subtool, right? And this is just a dummy as a reference, and I can just focus on this one. And because what I'm gonna use is the inflate, it is applied to anything like everything that is part of the same subtool. So whatever I do on this one is gonna be the same on the other one. So I can use this inflate to deflate it. -1 is perfect. Yep, that's it. So -1, you see it just uses this one as well. When I hide this one, delete hidden, and now we know that this is roughly the same thickness, right? So now what we can do is let's duplicate. I'm just thinking that maybe we can, let's just duplicate and do it differently for every single thing. So I'm gonna hold control. Actually, let's mirror it. Move it there, and then I'm gonna hold control, click and drag something about there, and the same thing for this one. And we'll tweak this so that it doesn't look like a spiral. But that's really all we need, something like this, and then we can mirror and well. All right, so now the whole point, the reason I did that is so that we can take, remember that's also the reason why I made sure that I had 8 points, so that we can have exactly the same points in here as the strings, so we can bridge these two together. So before I do that, I'm gonna go ahead and tweak this a little bit so that it doesn't look as perfect. So I'm gonna use the move topological brush, and let's get closer. I think from this angle is fine. And I'm gonna lock the camera just in case. So I'm gonna bring these points closer to each other. And this is the point that sort of goes in. So I'm gonna push that in, holding the Alt key. And maybe there's some of them that wrap on top of it. So this is just so that it's not perfect, right? And this is just with the move brush. Just gonna try to make the ones where the string sort of insert into be a bit more consistent, because that's obviously where all of them would fit in a way. Alright, but I'm not gonna spend too much time on this, just because this is something that you know, there's nothing really interesting to show here. It's just a bit of the same. It's just tweaking those things. But you know, this is an interesting technique for doing all sorts of things, like, you know, any type of wraps or a thing that wraps around things like strings and that sort of thing. All right, now in order to bridge these two together, obviously we need to make sure that these strings sort of live within the same subtool. So what I'll do is I'm gonna duplicate it. You know what? Let's just paste the original, just in case, to have it here in the originals. But I'm gonna go ahead and merge these two down. So merge down. Okay, cool. So now these live within the same tool or subtool, and we can go ahead and start the bridging process, which is gonna be slightly tricky just because they're really thin. But let me see the chat and see. Let's do a quick save and see if there's anything I can help with. Let's see. Saludos from Maicao, La Guajira, from Colombia. Is it? Yeah, Maicao. Oh no. Is it? Do you officially represent Pixologic? Nope. Do I have streaming on Blender? No, I don't. I'm starting to use Blender more and more recently, but I don't, like, I'm not an expert, so I'm not doing any streams or tutorials about it. Like, there's other artists that are way better than me, and probably know or show a better process than what I am doing at the moment. Excellent. Alrighty, so let's bridge these things, because we're getting close. We still have time for a couple more things that I wanted to do, more sculpting things. So I'm gonna go into solo mode, and the first thing I want to do is with the C modeler. I'm gonna go ahead and tag these faces, and I'm gonna right click, and I'm going to delete those. Okay, so I'm gonna do the same thing here, just the ones facing the other strings, right? So that we can bridge those two holes. Alrighty. Yep, so these ones are open. So now, in theory, what we need to do is, let's say, right click, bridge two holes. This is the tricky part. Click on that one, and then click on that one. There we go. It's sort of like wrapping around. Hang on, I think I deleted a point, so click on that. I'm gonna right click on an edge, and I'm gonna say, sorry, not an edge, on a face, and I'm gonna say do nothing, just in case. Point, do nothing. Alright, let's try that again. Click. For some reason it's not working. Pretty sure I have the same amount of polygons, which is weird. Anyway, so what I'll do is just bring them close and then do it a little bit easier like that. So let's bring in the gizmo, mask those points, and mask those points, hold control, whoops, hang on. Alright, let's do it simple. I'm gonna hold control and shift. I'm gonna access my selection brushes. So brushes, this slice curve is gonna be the one that's gonna give me some extra points in here. Right, that's it. Now I can go back to my gizmo, mask those points, and this one goes here. So I'm going to place it closer. That's it. So now we're gonna hopefully bridge that a little bit easier than before. Let's do the same thing here. So this one goes there. That one goes there. All right, we're getting there. And one more. All right, so that should bridge those things nicely because they're closer, hopefully. But I just want to double check that everything is looking good. So let's bring back everything. Bridge. And the neck. Perfect. All right, so we just need to tweak these, these points, which I think we just actually need to move this entire thing up a bit, because that's the whole point of that thing, right? So let's do that. Just gonna lift this slightly. Maybe not that much. Right, and then we can just add some extra loops here and tweak that. We can do that now if you want. So let's bring in the C modeler. Right click on an edge. This is too thin. Insert. Let's just add a couple there. Oops, let me undo that because I was doing it a bit random. I think I'm just gonna right click and I'm gonna insert multiple edge loops. So something like that, and then duplicate it on the other side. Same thing here. One more time. Okay, this is the issue. Right click, do nothing, insert. So for some reason is not letting me insert anything without. Oh, maybe I had the mask on. Nope, it's not letting me do it. This is really strange actually. It's actually doing the bridging at the same time that I'm trying to insert stuff. Let me try it again. Insert edge loop. Poly groups. Yeah, there's nothing weird. I don't know why this is happening, honestly. I'm gonna have to reset ZBrush to figure it out, but anyway, all I wanted to do was just some extra loops, which we can actually do with the slice curve anyway. But that shouldn't happen. Don't know why it's happening. And now we can use the move topological symmetry because we do have symmetry. And and we can just push this. All right, cool. All right, so that's looking good. We are almost done. We just need to add some, obviously, these things here, like how to hold these tuning pegs. That will be the next step. We have about 20 minutes, so I reckon. Yeah, we can do that. Let's do a quick save now. And let's work on this thing. So let's see what we can do for that. I think we're just gonna start with a cube and then take it from there. So I'm gonna go to the tuning pegs, go to the array mesh, and I'm gonna turn it off just so that we can work on one a little bit easier. Let's go ahead and append a well, I pasted this thing. That's not what I wanted to do, but we can take that and convert it into a Q-cube anyway. So let's put that one closer. So it's something about there in terms of the height. All right, so I think the first thing I want to do is kind of like the hook or whatever is holding that peg, and for that it's kind of like there. Let's see. So let's go to the C-modeler, and I'm gonna enable symmetry but in the Z-axis, and I'm gonna use local symmetry so that I can work from this point. So really, in case you didn't know about it, you can just work on different axes with symmetry and local symmetry. So obviously this cube in itself is symmetrical, but it's outside of the center of the world. So all I did was enable local symmetry, which for you guys should be under the transform palette here, and use the symmetry in the Z-axis, which, you know, it's that blue line there, so that I can work with symmetry in this point. And let's see, you can right click, insert a single edge loop, something like that. And let's see, another one around there. And I'm gonna tag this, whoops, Q mesh, tag this one, extrude. So this is the thing that's gonna hold it. And maybe a little bit more, so we can see. All right, and then let's use the slice curve to add a loop there, and then tag this one and hold control, extrude that one a tiny bit. Roughly, and then let's do, actually let's just do an insert here, tag these ones and push them in. Alright, super basic, but I think that'll do the trick. Go to dynamic. Yep, so that's what I want. Now let's place this one properly, and we can start adjusting it a bit, because obviously that is too much. We can also add an insert loop here just to add a bit more of a curvature. These points also could be closer, and that's the sort of tweaks that I would do. And of course, let's make sure that they fit nicely. There. Alrighty. So now let's enable dynamic. and then we can play with those points a little bit from this angle. Maybe another insert loop here, just so that we can get that curvature, that nice curvature here. I want to take these ones. So it's just masking points now, or unmasking points. Do a bit of rotation maybe. Okay, so this is another object or another area where we can take advantage of something we did in, I think, in the first stream about this guitar, which is the infinite depth, which is, you know, it's a feature that I don't use often, but for this type of things, like, really helpful. So let's go into solo mode. Oh, hang on, I forgot to enable symmetry. Brilliant. Let's mirror, whoops, local symmetry. I forgot to do that. Anyway, we can mirror in the z-axis and mirror and weld in the z-axis. So mirror and mirror and weld. Let's position this back where it should be. All right, so activate symmetry. Well, in this case we don't need to activate symmetry, but all right. So if we enable depth, it will be in the z-axis. Click on that. So basically, using the move topological, for example, and maybe the AccuCurve, we can move these points like so, and ZBrush is going to do it, or it should do it. If we enable it, it should do it in the infinite depth, but it's not working. Let's disable symmetry. Local symmetry. Why is it not doing it? Am I doing it in the right axis? Yeah, infinite depth in the z-axis. Yeah, I think we'll have to reset ZBrush. There are a couple of weird things that shouldn't be happening. Like this. Let's try move. Maybe with the move topological doesn't really work. I hadn't tried it, so now it is working. So let's go into dynamic. Now we can start taking these points and just reposition them a bit better, just to get that curvature of whatever this part is, to hold that. And I think I'm gonna add an insert loop here, maybe another one there, just to sharpen that, and go back to the move brush with infinite depth. Okay, think that should do it. Just have a feeling I must have moved something in a weird shape. I think I destroyed this. Let's undo all of that. Yeah, there was a weird movement there. Maybe I moved the camera. Anyway, this is roughly what I wanted to achieve. Alrighty. Now let's go ahead and add a couple more edge loops with the C modeler, just to sharpen this a lot more. turn off symmetry and, sorry, not symmetry, infinite depth, local symmetry, sharpen it like that, and like so, and maybe like so as well. Alrighty, so now that we have that, we can go ahead and, you know, duplicate this one. But before I do that, let's flatten these points. Right, so that we can extrude this a little bit easier. And just want to make sure this is the same polygroup, so I'm gonna, whoops, I'm gonna hide these ones at the bottom, invert that selection, and assign a single polygroup. So basically I can use or make use of this polygroup to extrude this bit. So I can right click, Q mesh, polygroup all, and I can extrude it like so, holding Alt to assign a different color. And then I'm gonna go ahead and delete this one, or delete polygroup all, sorry. So delete that one, whoops, not the whole thing. Let's delete hidden. And I'm also gonna mask just the edge, flatten that. Alright, so we have now this piece that we can duplicate, and because it's open, we can also bridge it. So let's do that. Let's enable the tuning peg thing, the array mesh, sorry. And now we can take this whole control, click and drag, somewhere there, without letting go. Do that. Okay, clear mask, and let's go into solo mode. Let's bridge this. Hopefully it's gonna work now. Right click, bridge this with this. That's too much. Right, and then this one and this one. Perfect. And then we can go ahead and right click on this, close holes, convex, that, same thing here, and there we go. So now we can enable dynamic. Obviously this is too thick, we're gonna tweak that in a second. Right, so there you have it. I'm gonna toggle off local symmetry and mirror and well. Whoops. Mirror and well in the x-axis. I always forget to change this back to the default ones. Alright, now we're gonna have to extend this obviously because it's not covering those pieces properly. So it's just a matter of pushing those points down a bit. Maybe like that. And we can use the slice curve again, just to add a few points in here. Maybe sharpen this a bit more. And I think that's looking good. So turn that off. And this is still a dynamic subdivision thing, so it's pretty good. We might have to tweak. I feel it's a little bit too thick. So let's see if I scale this just a tiny bit. It shouldn't deform things too much. Something like that. And these points as well, I'm gonna bring them in. So we just need to tweak the array, so that's gonna be tricky, but let's see. So the array, we just need to tweak the second one. So let's bring in this closer, the gizmo. So obviously moving that will move that array. So we now need to just tweak this. Like that. And also move these points again. So let's take all of that, invert, and again, because we have the array, we just need to do it in one, and ZBrush will do it to the rest. So just push these ones like this, and as long as we don't change the volume much of the entire thing that we're using for the array, it's gonna be pretty easy. All right, looking good. Let's do a quick save, and just to wrap up today's session, I'm just gonna add a couple of bolts in there, and the rest is just really, you know, if you want to do some details here, like carving into the wood, you can go ahead and do that. That's the sort of thing that I would spend some time doing, actually. And maybe, you know, like in this case, I did a separate object, but you can actually tweak this so that it flows nicely into the neck of the guitar. So that's something else you can do. But yeah, let's go ahead and just add a couple more things on this object. I'm gonna use the same sort of thingy, maybe this one, and I'm gonna drive the size of this insert mesh using the size of the brush. So let's set the brush to 2, maybe that's too small, to 3 maybe, or 4. It's still too small. Oh, it's hard to. All right, and this one has symmetry in the z-axis. Let's just do it in the x-axis. So in order to use the insert brushes and determine the size of the insert brushes with the brush, you have to click and hold Control. So if you click and drag, right, you can determine the size of these like this just by dragging. But if you hold the Control key, it will snap to that size of the brush, and then you can rotate around and do this. Like so. All right, and we can go ahead and clear that mask. I'm gonna auto group, hide these pieces, group visible, and split hidden. So now we have the little bolts as well in a separate one. And we can just create a new folder for this, and let's call it tuning X, and then just drop that in there, and we are pretty much done. Again, we just finished right on time. But if you wanted to just to wrap up today, I'll do the bridge. I'll reset ZBrush and I'll do the bridge here, which should work perfectly fine for the strings. So this bridging should work perfectly fine. And what I was gonna say, you can take this, right? There's a pretty clean geometry, and you can duplicate it, right? And this is a cool technique. You can duplicate that and go into Dynamesh, for example. Hang on, why is it Dynameshing with subdivisions? Oh, not subdivision, had dynamic. So let's actually apply dynamic and Dynamesh. Nope. All right, a bit more of Dynamesh actually. A resolution of 400 or something. There we go. So it's the same thing, living in the same space. You can do something cool like, let's say, maybe more than this. All right, something like that with a masking tool. Then bring in the gizmo, push that in, you know, redynamesh, all of that. So this is just the normal sketching, sculpting techniques, and use the damp standard brush, for example, to add some things like this. I'm doing this very quickly, but you get the idea. Something like that. But because these are living sort of in the same space, you know, whatever you want, right? But this one's living in the same space as the other one, right? You can just create, apply, let me just do it here, duplicate. Let's apply the dynamic subdivision, right? And we need more than this. We need, let's say, let's say 1,000,000. And then we can just take this one and project the details, sorry, of this one into this one, right? So for that, I'm gonna, why do we have so many off? Strings. All right, so I just needed to make sure I can turn back on what we're using. So I'm gonna hold the shift key to hide everything, get out of solo mode, and enable only these two. So as you can see, they're living in the same spot. I'm gonna take the sketch and I'm gonna project it. So selecting the one that you want to project onto and leaving anything else that you want to project to on. We're gonna just project all, and don't know what happened there. Solo, yeah, that destroyed everything. Yeah, there's something weird happening. It shouldn't do that, but what I can do is also hide whatever I don't need to project. So just gonna keep this one, and I can just delete hidden. It's just a sketch anyway. So it's just this bit that I want to project. Should work. I don't know why it's not letting me. Oh, now it worked. All right. So it projects all the polygroups as well. So this polygroup, autogroup, or polygroup visible. Now there's something weird happening. I have to check what's going on. I don't know what's happening, and this is something that we forgot to do. Yeah, this has thickness. So that is from the dynamic palette. So let's delete that. Let's do it properly. So let's take this, undo that. Should work fine. So this is the original. I'm gonna duplicate that. Now when so the thickness, yeah, it has thickness. I forgot about that. Let's delete thickness and apply that as it is. All right, so now it has no thickness. Now it should work fine. But because we did it in a separate one that had a different volume, it's not gonna project nicely. So I'm gonna have to just do it on this one. This is a very convoluted process, but it should work if you remember to apply the subdivision without thickness. So delete hidden, and just gonna place this closer. So it's just a little bit of gap because of that thickness. Now let's do that. Project. Nope, still doing it. All right, we'll have to check what's going on there, but in theory you can just project that, or now that you have subdivision, if you don't want to project anything or do sketches, you can just do it directly on this, right? Because now we have enough geometry to work with. and that would be my preferred method in this case, that we had a clean base. I was just trying to show you a different process in case you wanna, have everything sketchy in Dynamesh and then convert it and then start cleaning it up. But we've been working with a pretty decent, clean topology from the beginning. So as long as you have subdivision levels, you can go ahead and do all your ornaments and stuff like that to make it look cool. But yep, so I'm gonna delete that one. We don't need it. Bring back everything, and I'm gonna leave it there. Let's do a quick render. All right, that's it. I'm gonna wrap it up now, guys. How can I clear the polygrouped cache? No idea. Sorry. I think you just, I don't know. I don't know how to do that. It hasn't been a problem for me. Like, I didn't even know that about the cache of the polygrouped, to be honest. So no, haven't run into any of those issues. All right, guys. So I'm gonna leave it here. Hopefully you have found these techniques and this session useful. There's a lot of extra tweaking that we can do to make this look nicer, which if I have time I'll do it, and I'll share the end result. But it's just very small things like making sure that everything flows nicely into each other and that sort of thing. It's not very complex. For the most part, the techniques that I show you is what I would use to build something like this, or a few of those at least. And what we did today was kind of like the most complex and tedious, more precise, I guess, modeling, which were just the tuning pegs as well as finishing the strings. But yeah, hopefully that gives you an idea for your own guitar. All right, guys, so I'm gonna leave it here, and I'll see you next week. Alrighty, take it easy. Bye.